When you think about what we ask of teachers, especially here in Malaysia, it's really not just about delivering lessons, is it? Photosynthesis or Bahasa Malaysia grammar.
Not at all.
They're often juggling so much more, like being part-time counselors, admin staff, hiding in plain sight, and sometimes even, the class comedian just to keep things going.
Right.
So with all those different hats they have to wear, it makes you wonder, can that initial spark, that passion for teaching, can it actually hold up against the sheer demands?
Yeah.
Especially when we look at the workload and, well, the pay.
That's exactly the question we're diving into today.
Yeah.
And look, this isn't just guesswork or, random stories. We're trying to get to the heart of the issues facing educators in Malaysia, specifically that tricky relationship between their dedication, their passion, the often huge workload they have,
Yeah.
and the whole compensation piece.
Right. And to really get into it, we've been reading this research paper, Teaching in Malaysia, Balancing Passion, Workload, and Compensation. It's actually really good because it mixes solid academic research with, like, real stories from teachers themselves, anecdotes that really hit home.
Yeah, it gives you a proper feel for it. And for you listening, if you want to get the main points quickly without getting bogged down in, pages and pages, this deep dive, that's what it's for. We're pulling out the key stuff from the paper so you get a clear picture of what teachers in Malaysia are dealing with and why it matters.
Okay, great. So let's unpack this then. The paper kicks off looking at why people go into teaching in Malaysia in the first place.
Right.
It mentions some research, Azizan et al. From 2019, and basically says passion is the #1 reason, overwhelmingly.
Yeah, that initial drive.
It's that feeling, right, wanting to make a difference, shape young minds, all that.
That's the starting point, absolutely, the ideal. But, interestingly, the paper brings up what it calls the passion paradox.
Passion paradox, okay.
Yeah. So you have these teachers who care incredibly deeply about their students, about their subjects. But at the same time, they have real financial needs, like anyone else.
Sure.
And that passion, however strong it is, well, it doesn't exactly pay the mortgage or the bills, does it?
No.
So you get this conflict. Teachers feel torn between giving everything to the job and needing to provide for their families. It can genuinely make them question if they can stay in the profession long term.
That makes sense. And that sort of links to another point the paper raises, doesn't it? This whole societal view of teachers as heroes, or even martyrs sometimes.
Yeah, Tan mentioned that back in 2021.
Right. And while that sounds nice, calling them heroes, the paper suggests it might actually be a bit problematic. Like, what are the downsides of that narrative?
Well, if you think about it, this hero talk, it can kind of gloss over the need for real talk about fair pay and proper support. It can almost deflect from those conversations. Like, the paper quotes one teacher saying something like, "If I'm a hero, where's my superhero salary?"
Fair point.
It really makes you think, does all that praise actually translate into better resources or better conditions for teachers? Or is it just words?
Exactly. Like, thanks for the compliment, but what about the practical stuff? And speaking of practical stuff, the day-to-day grind. The paper really goes into the workload. It's way more than just teaching in the classroom. So we've got this passion, right? But then the paradox hits them, and then it comes the sheer weight of the job itself. Let's dig into that workload reality.
Absolutely. The paper paints a really clear picture. Yes, they're subject experts, obviously, but they're also expected to be counselors for students going through things, admin clerks buried in forms.
Right.
And even low-key comedians just trying to keep students engaged. It's a massive range of tasks.
And there's data on this too, isn't there? Something from the Ministry of Education in 2022.
That study found that only about 0% of a teacher's time is actually spent on teaching itself.
40%. Wow, that seems incredibly low. So what on earth are they doing with the other 60%?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. The paper calls it an administrative avalanche.
Okay.
Think constant meetings, endless forms to fill out, trying to keep up with policy changes that seem to happen all the time.
Sounds draining.
It is. It takes up a huge chunk of time and, crucially, pulls them away from focusing on the students and the actual lessons.
And it's not just the official admin stuff either, is it? The paper talks about extracurriculars too.
Oh, yeah. That's another big-time commitment. Organizing sports day, running the debate club.
Participating in gotong royong community work.
Exactly. Things that are good in themselves, valuable for the students and school community, no doubt.
Sure.
But they definitely add more hours onto an already overflowing schedule. Lim and Abdullah looked into this in 2020. The paper kind of jokes about it being an extracurricular black hole.
Ah, I can see that.
It's a huge time sink, often done outside normal school hours, and maybe not always fully appreciated. There's actually a funny bit in the paper, an anecdote from a teacher.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, who basically said their degree didn't prepare them for having to inflate like 200 balloons in 10 minutes for some school function.
Oh my goodness, right. Shows the sheer variety of unexpected demands, doesn't it?
Totally. And for you listening, if you're a parent, you can see how this massive workload might affect the attention teachers can give each kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings us, naturally, to the money side of things. Compensation. The paper does say there have been some recent salary changes, adjustments, which, well, that's good news.
It is definitely a positive step, those 2023 MOE updates. But, and it's a significant but, the paper stresses that even with these revisions, financial struggles are still very real for a lot of teachers.
So the base salary often isn't enough.
For many, no. The reality is they still find it hard to make ends meet just on their teaching salary alone.
And that's where the side hustles come in. I remember reading about that.
Exactly. The paper mentions teachers doing private tuition on the side, which is quite common.
Yeah.
But also other things. Based on some unofficial survey this year, even reselling K-pop merchandise online.
Wow, really? K-pop merch.
Yeah. It just shows the lengths some have to go to supplement their income, even though they're fully committed to their main job.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? And it makes you wonder about sustainability. If teachers are exhausted from working second jobs.
Precisely. What does that mean for their energy levels in the classroom? For their own well-being?
And the paper tackles that old chestnut too, but you get long holidays.
Ah, yes, the holiday myth. Chan wrote about this in 2023.
Yeah, what's the reality there, according to the paper?
Well, it makes it pretty clear those school holidays often aren't just downtime. They're not just long vacations.
Okay.
For many teachers, it's unpaid time they desperately need to catch up on marking, plan lessons for the next term, attend courses, deal with other work stuff that piled up.
So it's more like deferred work.
Kind of. The paper calls it hidden overtime, which I think sums it up pretty well.
Hidden overtime. Yeah, that fits. There seems to be a real gap between how people think teaching works and the actual reality of the workload and pay.
There really does. Which leads the paper into talking about potential solutions, ways forward.
Right, which is important. We need to talk about what could actually change.
Definitely. The paper outlines a few key policy ideas. One big one is cutting down on all those non-teaching admin tasks we talked about.
The administrative avalanche.
Exactly. The thinking is, let teachers actually teach. Let them focus on what they were trained for, what they're passionate about.
Makes sense. Free up their time and energy.
Yeah, streamlining those processes could make a huge difference. And then there's the call to revise salary scales properly, to make sure pay reflects the actual importance and the demands of the job. As the paper nicely puts it, passion is great, but so is not living paycheck to paycheck.
Couldn't agree more. What else did it suggest?
The mental health support. That came up as critical.
Ah, okay. More than just like those one-off motivational talks.
Much more. The paper highlights the difference between superficial seminars and the real need for proper, accessible, maybe even free therapy sessions.
Because teaching is emotionally draining.
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
That needs to be acknowledged and actually supported. If teachers are stressed, burnt out, well, that affects the kids, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The quality of education suffers.
True.
And finally, the paper just calls for more respect for the profession overall. Basic respect. Given how vital teachers are, they're literally shaping the country's future, their pay, their working conditions. It all needs to reflect that value. Society needs to value them properly.
So wrapping it all up then, this deep dive into the research, it really shines a light on this constant juggling act for teachers in Malaysia. This intense pressure between their passion, the huge workload, and the way they're compensated.
That's the core tension, isn't it? Passion gets them started, keeps them going to some extent. But these systemic issues, the workload, the pay, they risked grinding that passion down, leading to burnout.
Yeah. And there was that quote at the end of the paper, wasn't there? Kind of summed it up starkly.
Oh, yeah, the one about patience and sanity.
That's the one. If you want to test your patience, become a teacher. If you want to test your sanity, become a teacher in Malaysia.
Oof. Powerful stuff. It's hard.
It really does.
It leaves a big question hanging there, really,
Yes.
for you listening.
Yeah.
As a society, how much do we actually value education? And the people doing that crucial work? What changes do we really need to make systemically to support teachers properly, to make sure their passion doesn't just survive, but actually thrives? Something to think about.